Welcome to Horrified Stories, where fear comes to life. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Let's start our today's story. I was followed home by something I can't see. It started on a Tuesday evening, the kind of night that tricks you into thinking you're safe. The streets were alive with the soft hum of streetlights, the occasional bark of a distant dog, and the shuffle of leaves being swept across the pavement. I was walking home from the library, where I'd been researching local folklore for a project. My bag was stuffed with books, each one promising chilling tales of haunted woods, forgotten rituals, and ghostly whispers. The walk home was usually uneventful, a straight shot down 3 quiet streets, but that night, something felt off. At first, it was subtle. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I felt the prickling sensation of being watched. I glanced behind me. Nothing. The street was empty, save for the rhythmic flicker of a faulty street lamp in the distance, shaking off the unease. I picked up my pace, and I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound, like a footstep, but not quite. It wasn't the steady crunch of shoes on gravel, but something lighter, like the brushing of fabric against the ground. I stopped in my tracks, heart pounding, and turned around again. The street was deserted. I forced a laugh, convincing myself it was just my imagination. After all, I'd just spent hours reading about phantom figures and shadowy beings. It was no surprise my mind was playing tricks on me. But the feeling didn't go away. As I continued walking, the sound followed always just far enough to make me doubt I'd heard it. I crossed the street, testing to see if it would do the same. The sound persisted. My chest tightened. I pulled my phone from my pocket, its cold screen lighting up the darkness around me. My first instinct was to call someone, anyone, but I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, I think I'm being followed by nothing. Instead, I opened the camera app and turned it to selfie mode, angling it behind me. The dim glow of the streetlights illuminated the empty road. Relief washed over me until the screen flickered, just for a moment, but long enough for me to catch a glimpse of something, the shadow, shapeless and indistinct, darting out of frame. I whipped around, phone clutched tightly in my hand. Nothing. My breath came in shallow gasps. My heart was racing now, the kind of frantic rhythm that drowns out logic. I told myself it was a glitch, maybe a bug on the lens, but deep down, I knew better. Whatever it was there, and it was following me. The last few blocks home felt like an eternity. I walked as fast as I could without breaking into a full sprint, the sound of my own footsteps masking anything else that might have been there. When I finally reached my apartment, I fumbled with my keys, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. The street behind me was still empty, but the sensation of being watched had only intensified. The second I was inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it. For good measure, I slid the chain into place and double-checked the windows. My apartment felt different now, like it wasn't entirely mine anymore. The familiar creaks and groans of the old building sounded foreign, each one making me jump. I tried to shake off the fear, but the nagging feeling wouldn't let go. Something had followed me, something I couldn't see. I didn't know what it wanted or why it had chosen me, but I was certain of one thing: it wasn't going to leave me alone. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes, felt like an announcement that it was here, somewhere in the shadows of my apartment. I kept the lights on, every single one of them, hoping to banish whatever had followed me home, but light didn't seem to matter. It started around 8 a.m. I was lying on the couch, the TV on low to keep me company. That's when I heard a faint whisper, soft and distant, like it was coming from the far corner of the room. At first, I thought it was the TV, but when I muted it, the whispering continued. I frowned, straining to make out the words. They weren't in any language I recognized, but the tone was unmistakable, urgent, pleading, almost desperate. My heart thudded in my chest as I slowly sat up. The whispering stopped. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. No response, just silence, thick and suffocating. I didn't dare move. My eyes skimmed the room, searching for anything out of place. The shadows seemed to shift and stretch, as if alive. A cold draft brushed against my neck. Even though the windows were sealed shut, it wasn't just cold, it was heavy, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. And then it happened. From the corner of the room, where the shadows were darkest, came the faint sound of breathing. Low, deliberate, and ultra-real. I felt my stomach drop. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. "Who's there?" I whispered. The breathing stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, a single word broke the silence, a hoarse, guttural whisper that sent chills racing down my spine. "Mine." I bolted off the couch, grabbing my phone as I ran to my bedroom. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking, leaning against the door. I tried to catch my breath. My mind was racing. What was it? What did it want? And why did it say that word? I needed answers. Still clutching my phone, I opened the camera app again. If I couldn't see it with my own eyes, maybe the camera could. I hesitated, then slowly panned the phone around the room. At first, I saw nothing, just my messy bed, the pile of clothes on the chair, the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds. But then, as I pointed the camera toward the closet, I saw it. A shadow. It wasn't shaped like a person. It was amorphous, shifting and pulsing like smoke trapped in a jar. It was darker than the surrounding shadows, almost like it was absorbing the light around it. I lowered the phone, but to my naked eye, the closet looked empty. The shadow was only visible through the screen. My hands trembled as I tried to take a picture. The moment I hit the shutter button, the camera app frowned. The screen went black, and my phone shut off completely. I stared at it, horrified. It was fully charged moments ago. A soft knock on the door broke my trance. "Is someone there?" I whispered, backing away from the door. The knock came again, louder this time. Then the doorknob began to rattle, slowly at first, then violently, as if someone or something was trying to force its way in. I screamed, grabbing the first thing I could find, a heavy book from my nightstand, and braced myself. But just as suddenly as it started, the rattling stopped. Silence. I stood there, clutching the book like a lifeline, my ears straining for any sound. After what felt like an eternity, I worked up the courage to peek through the small gap beneath the door. There was nothing there. No shadow, no feet, no sign of anyone or anything. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When morning finally came, the first rays of sunlight streaming through the blinds, I felt a cautious sense of relief. Whatever had haunted me through the night seemed to retreat with the dawn. I stepped out of my bedroom, every nerve on edge, and cautiously inspected the apartment. Everything was exactly as I had left it except for one thing. On the living room wall, written in what looked like black ash, was a single word: mine. The next morning, I debated whether I was losing my mind. The word on the wall, the whispers, the shadow, it felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I scrubbed at the black marks with a damp cloth, hoping to erase the word, but it wouldn't budge. The ash-like substance smeared, staining my fingertips, and left a faint, oily residue. I stepped back, staring at it. My reflection in the TV caught my eye, and for a split second, I thought I saw something standing behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. My breathing was ragged, the air around me heavy with tension. I couldn't stay here. I grabbed my bag, stuffed in a few essentials, and left the apartment. The thought of being alone with it was unbearable. My plan was simple: go somewhere crowded, somewhere bright, anywhere but here. The walk to the cafe down the street felt endless. Even in broad daylight, the sensation of being followed clung to me. Every step I took felt mirrored, every shadow stretching a little too far. I resisted the urge to look back, my grip tightening on the strap of my bag. When I finally reached the cafe, the warm hum of chatter and the smell of coffee eased some of my tension. I found a corner seat, far from the windows, and pulled out my laptop. I needed answers. I started by searching for anything that could explain what was happening. Ghosts, demons, hallucinations. I dove into every rabbit hole the internet could offer. One recurring theme caught my attention: attachments. According to various forums and articles, some entities latch onto people, feeding off their energy or emotions. Many stories describe the feeling of being watched, unexplained noises, and shadows seen out of the corner of the eye. The one thing they all agreed on: the attachment didn't just go away. I scrolled through the stories, my stomach sinking. Some people claimed to have freed themselves through rituals or exorcisms. Others weren't so lucky. One post, buried deep in a paranormal forum, stopped me cold. If it follows you home, it's already too late. They choose you for a reason. Don't run, it only makes them angry. A shiver ran down my spine. I closed the laptop, suddenly hyper-aware of my surroundings. The cafe felt too quiet, the laughter and conversation muffled, like I was hearing it through a thick wall of fog. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the glossy counter near the register, a shadow shifted unnaturally, lingering at the edge of the light. No one else seemed to notice. My chest tightened as I realized it had followed me here. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door. Outside, the street was alive with people, but it didn't feel safe. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter where I went, it would always be one step behind. Back in my apartment, I decided to try something different. I needed to confront it, whatever it was. I didn't know if that was brave or stupid, but running clearly wasn't working. I sat in the living room, every light on, and spoke out loud. "What do you want?" The words echoed in the silence, and for a moment, nothing happened. I almost laughed at myself, feeling ridiculous, but then the lights flickered. A cold gust of air swept through the room. Though the windows were still closed, the shadow in the corner darkened, shifting like liquid smoke. My pulse quickened as the faint whisper started again, circling me like an unseen predator. "What do you want from me?" I repeated, louder this time. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. The whisper stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl that made the floor vibrate beneath me. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the couch. From the shadow, a single word emerged, low and distorted, like it was being dragged across broken glass. "Stay." My blood ran cold. Stay. Did it mean stay in the apartment? Stay in its presence? I couldn't understand what it wanted, but the implication was clear: it couldn't escape. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the bedroom, slamming the door shut. But it didn't feel like a refuge anymore. The apartment was no longer mine. It was its. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. At first, I didn't remember falling asleep, but the events of the day came rushing back. My room was dark, the streetlight outside casting faint lines across the ceiling. I reached for my phone, but it wasn't on the nightstand. Panic set in as I searched the bed, then the floor. That's when I heard the faint hum of static. My eyes darted to the closet, where a faint glow pulsed from the crack in the door. My phone, somehow, it had ended up in there, its screen flashing erratically. I should have stayed in bed, but something compelled me to move. Step by step, I approached the closet, the static growing louder. The air was colder here, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. I hesitated, then grabbed the doorknob. The moment I opened it, the static stopped. My phone lay on the floor, the screen cracked, but functional. I picked it up, and the screen lit up with a single word typed across a blank text message. Stay. That's when I felt a hand, cold and unseen, resting on my shoulder. I don't remember screaming when I felt the cold, invisible hand on my shoulder, but I must have. My throat was raw, my chest heaving, and yet I found myself standing there, frozen, clutching my phone like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. It didn't let go. The sensation of icy pressure lingered, so palpable it felt like he could dig his claws into me at any moment. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the hand withdrew, leaving behind a chilling numbness that seeped into my skin. I stumbled back, my legs barely able to hold me up. I couldn't stay here, not another second. I grabbed a jacket, my wallet, and the cracked phone, and bolted out of the apartment. The hallway was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. Every step I took echoed unnaturally, as if the sound was coming from somewhere else entirely. I made it to the street, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. For the first time, I realized how alone I felt. The streets were eerily empty, the distant hum of traffic the only sound. I had no plan, no idea where to go, but I kept walking, hoping the movement would clear my head. It wasn't until I reached the edge of the city park that I saw a woman sitting on a bench beneath a flickering street lamp. She was bundled in a long coat, a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, and she seemed out of place. Something about her drew me in, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the calm in her expression, or the way her eyes seemed to follow me as I approached. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice low and steady. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "You could say that." She tilted her head, studying me. "You've been marked." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the bench. "Sit. You've got that look, same one I had when it first happened to me." I set her down, not because I trusted her, but because I was desperate. "What's following me?" She leaned back, her hands resting on her knees. "Something old, something that doesn't belong in our world. Once it latches onto you, it doesn't let go easily." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. "Why me? I didn't do anything." "That's the thing," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "It doesn't need a reason. Maybe you caught its attention in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe you stepped somewhere you shouldn't have. Or maybe it just likes you." Her words sent a chill through me. "How do I get rid of it?" She smiled, but it wasn't comforting. "You don't. You learn to live with it, or you don't live at all." I shook my head. "There has to be a way. There are rules," she said, leaning closer. "It doesn't want you dead. It wants you afraid, desperate. That's how it feeds. If you want to survive, you need to understand what it wants and play its game." I clenched my fists. "What kind of game?" She hesitated, as if deciding how much to tell me. "It'll test you, push you to your limits. The more you resist, the stronger it gets. But there's one thing you can do: set boundaries. It might follow you, but it can't cross certain lines without your permission." My mind raced. How do I set boundaries? Her gaze darkened. "That's up to you. Everyone's different. But remember this: if you make a promise to it, you better keep it. It doesn't forgive." I didn't sleep that night. After leaving the park, I wandered the city until the early hours, her cryptic advice echoing in my mind. Set boundaries, make promises, don't break them. By the time I returned to the apartment, exhaustion had dulled the edges of my fear, but it was still there, a constant, gnawing presence. The moment I stepped inside, I knew it hadn't gone anywhere. The air was thick, the kind of heaviness that made every breath feel like a struggle. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, deeper and darker than they should have been. I stood in the center of the living room, my voice shaking as I said, "I know you're here." The shadows seemed to ripple, a soft whisper brushing against my ears. "I'll stay," I said, my throat tightening around the words. But you have to follow my rules. The room fell silent. For a moment, I thought it hadn't worked. Then, from the corner, the shadow began to shift. It moved slowly, deliberately, until it took on a vague, humanoid shape. It didn't come closer, but its presence was suffocating. My rules, I repeated, forcing myself to meet its unseen gaze. You can't touch me, you can't hurt me, and you can't come near me when I'm sleeping. The shadow quivered, as if laughing. I mean it, I shouted. If you want me to stay, those are the rules. The air grew colder, the lights flickering. For a terrifying moment, I thought it would reject my offer, but then the shadow retreated, dissolving into the far corner of the room. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I knew this wasn't the end. It had accepted my rules for now, but how long would it stay obedient? And what would happen if I ever slipped up? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. The next few days were a fragile dance with the unseen. I stuck to my rules, never daring to test the boundaries I'd set. The shadow remained in the apartment, lingering in corners or slithering just out of sight, but it followed my conditions closely. At night, I'd sometimes wake to the faint sound of whispers beyond the bedroom door, a soft, insistent plea that almost broke my resolve, but I never let it in. Despite the temporary peace, I knew this was unsustainable. The shadow wasn't gone. It was waiting. It wasn't just a presence anymore. I was a force, growing stronger with every flicker of fear it extracted from me, and I could feel it closing in. The breaking point came on the 7th night. I'd just turned off the lights and settled into bed when the temperature in the room dropped abruptly. My breath misted in the air, and a familiar heaviness pressed against my chest. Something was wrong. The rules I'd set, fragile agreement that had kept it at bay, felt meaningless now. A deep, guttural growl echoed through the room, vibrating the walls and rattling the windows. My phone lit up on the nightstand, vibrating violently. I snatched it up, my heart pounding as I read the message that had appeared on the screen. Enough! Before I could react, the bedroom door slammed open, revealing a wall of blackness that seemed to devour the hallway light. The shadow didn't stay in the corner this time. It surged forward, filling the room with a darkness so thick it felt alive. I scrambled out of bed, my back pressed against the wall. You broke the rules, I shouted, my voice cracking. The shadow pulsed, almost mocking me. Then, from the depths of the darkness, came a voice. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was loud, distorted, and terrifyingly human. No rules, no boundaries. You are mine. In my panic, the stranger's words echoed in my mind. Set boundaries, make promises, don't break them. But the entity had broken them first. Hadn't it? Did that mean the agreement was void? Desperation clawed at me. I needed a new plan, something stronger, something final. I grabbed one of the books I'd borrowed from the library. It had been sitting untouched on the living room table, but now it felt like my only lifeline. The book was old, its pages brittle, and it detailed rituals and protections against malevolent spirits. Flipping through it frantically, I found what I needed, a banishment ritual. It was risky, the text warned, and failure could make the entity stronger. But I didn't have a choice. I dragged the book into the bedroom, my hands shaking as I began to follow the instructions. I drew a circle of salt on the floor, lighting candles at each point of an imaginary star within it. My voice trembled as I began to chant the incantation, the ancient words feeling heavy and foreign on my tongue. The shadow recoiled at first, retreating to the edges of the room, but then it began to fight back. The walls shuddered, the air thick with static. The whispers turned into a deafening roar, a cacophony of voices screaming in languages I couldn't understand. The candles flickered, threatening to go out. The salt circle began to smudge as the shadow pressed against it, testing its strength. I pushed through the fear, shouting the final lines of the incantation. Leave this place. You are not welcome here. For a moment, the shadow hesitated, its form quivering as if caught in a struggle. Then it surged forward, breaking through the circle. It was on me now, its cold, suffocating presence wrapping around my body like a vice. My vision blurred, and I felt myself slipping, my thoughts unraveling as the darkness consumed me. And then, in the chaos, a memory surfaced, the stranger's warning. If you make a promise, you better keep it. It doesn't forgive. The shadow wanted me fear, my submission, my soul, but I still have one thing left to bargain with. I'll say, I screamed, my voice cutting through the roar. If you leave this place forever, I'll stay with you. No running, no fighting, just me. The room fell silent. The pressure lifted, and for the first time, I felt the entity hesitate. The shadow coalesced into a single, dark mass in front of me. Its form was almost human now, and though it had no face, I could feel its gaze boring into me. You promise, it rasped, the voice low and dripping with malice. Yes, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I promise. When I woke up, the apartment was quiet. The oppressive heaviness was gone, and the air felt normal. The shadow was nowhere to be seen. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again, but I knew better than to think it was over. The entity had accepted my promise, but it wasn't gone. It was waiting somewhere in the darkness, just out of sight. I could feel its presence, faint but constant, like a tether connecting us. And now, I belong to it. I don't leave the apartment anymore. I can't. The one time I tried, the shadow appeared at the threshold, blocking my path. It didn't say anything it didn't have to. Its presence was a reminder of the promise I made, a bond I could never break. I don't know how much longer I can live like this. The stranger was right, it doesn't want me dead. It wants me afraid, desperate, a prisoner in my own life. I've stopped looking for a way out. Maybe there isn't one. All I can do now is say, if you like this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share and subscribe the channel. Help us grow. Thanks for watching.